The man in the octagon taunted with icy contempt, breaking his opponent's will with trash talk and the zombie walk. But he knew better than anyone. He despised fighting, despised every punch he threw. Yet the only reason he became a bloodthirsty brute was to keep a promise to a girl who had died. His name is Nick Diaz. He was born in Stockton in 1983. It was a rough California town, riddled with poverty and violence. When he was a child, his father walked out on the family. His mother worked 3 jobs just to keep her 3 children fed. As the eldest son, Nick was forced to carry burdens far beyond his years. At school, his poverty made him a target of constant prejudice. To survive in a neighborhood ruled by the law of the jungle, he put on the mask of a thug and learned to settle problems with his fists. After being expelled from high school for fighting, he chose the path of combat. For the poor, it was the most direct way to change their fate. But what truly kept him going was a girl named Stephanie. She was the only light in young Nick's life. She believed this raw, powerful boy could become a real fighter. Yet fate first offered the illusion of salvation, only to tear it apart with its own hands. In the summer of 2000, Stephanie, tormented by depression, took her own life on the highway. And with her died the insecure, unformed Nick. After that, he finished his opponent with a ruthless triangle choke, in his professional debut. That night, he walked 11 kilometers alone to Stephanie's grave. Standing before her headstone, he swore he would become a true champion, the Nick Diaz who would make her proud. UFC 47, 2003. At 20, Nick stormed into the octagon to face heavy hitter Robbie Lawler. He put on one of the cockiest shows in MMA history. He stalked forward with that stiff, zombie-like shuffle, pressuring him every step, seemingly unfazed by Lawler's deadly power shots. This wasn't just taunting, it was a finely tuned strategy. At its core, the zombie walk is psychological warfare and damage trading. He deliberately leaned in and exposed his chin. Armed with the absurd durability forged through triathlon training, he simply ate the damage. Then he poured on high-volume, non-fight-ending pillow fists, wearing down his opponent's gas tank like a dull blade carving flesh. He landed precise shots while spitting trash talk right into his opponent's ear. He even dropped his hands mid-exchange and tapped his chin. That almost suicidal insanity completely threw Lawler off his rhythm. When the enraged Lawler swung with power, Nick used his ghostly feel for range to pull back, then drilled him with a precise rear hook. Lawler crashed to the canvas. Nick rose coldly, that face etched with contempt, announcing to the world that the era of Stockton's bad boy had officially begun. In 2007, fed up with the UFC's lowball contract, Nick took his talents to Japan's Pride promotion. At Pride 33, he used a rare Gaga plata to submit the reigning lightweight king, Takanori Gomi. Although the win was later overturned after he tested positive for marijuana, it only cemented his villain persona as a cult icon in the fight game. In 2009, he faced MMA pioneer Frank Shamrock in Strikeforce. Nick went into public execution mode. He was like a tireless harvester, tearing his opponent's body apart, and with his words he shredded whatever dignity his opponent had left. This slaughter announced that the era of the old-school gentleman fighter was over. After reeling off 10 straight wins in Strikeforce, the 28-year-old Nick returned to the UFC draped in glory. This time, he was no longer the discarded exile, but the throne's public enemy number 1. His target was the welterweight king, Georges St-Pierre, GSP. At UFC 158 in 2013, this clash of the century finally took place in Montreal. On one side stood Stockton's foul-mouthed street punk. On the other was a picture of Grace, Canada's national hero, armed to the teeth with science. This wasn't just a title fight, it was a clash between 2 social classes. At the pre-fight press conference, GSP said Nick reminded him of the people who bullied him as a child. At that moment, this street-hardened tough guy froze. GSP could never have imagined that the child who once had a gun pointed at his head, whose hair was smeared with gum, cowering and shaking in a corner, was Nick himself. His violence was only armor he put on to survive. On the eve of the fight, the infamous 0.9-pound conspiracy erupted. The hometown champion, GSP, weighed in at 170.9 pounds, over the limit. But the Quebec Commission changed the rules at the last minute, ignoring the decimal point and waving him through. Carrying the lonely fury of a hunted man, Nick walked to the octagon. The fight turned into a suffocating exercise in tactical control. GSP put on a masterclass in wrestling, operating like a precision machine, smothering Nick at every turn, rendering his vaunted stand-up striking useless. Though he ultimately lost on the scorecards, Nick still fired off, even from underneath, that signature Stockton slap. His final act of defiance. Nick said it on camera countless times, he didn't like fighting. To him, it was never about glory. Just a poor man's way of earning bread. In 2015, after the notorious battle of the drug kings with Anderson the Spider Silva, the Nevada State Athletic Commission hit him with a 5-year suspension over marijuana. In the very prime of his life, his career was forcibly put on pause. In 2021, after 6 years away, 38-year-old Nick returned to the octagon, and standing across from him was Robbie Lawler, the same man from 17 years earlier. This was no longer about revenge. It was a reunion written by fate. Nick looked out of shape, and the fury in his eyes was gone, replaced by the exhaustion of a man running on empty. In the third round, after being dropped, he chose to take a knee and not continue. This time, he finally dared to show the world the side of him that was exhausted, weary of it all, and real. There were no boos in the arena, only a tidal wave of applause. The fight world's most infamous villain was really using a lifetime of rage to protect the broken boy inside him. He raised his middle finger to the world not as provocation. It was his way of questioning fate. When the smoke cleared, he honored that late-night vow with a body full of scars. He became the Nick Diaz everyone could be proud of, and finally found the boy who had always longed for peace.